gentlemen, welcome to the Independent City Council. It's Tuesday, October 10th, 2017 at 6:30 in the evening, and fall has officially come here today. I want to give a special welcome to, this is being live streamed on Facebook, so hi folks on Facebook. This is just like live, this is just like TV. So for anybody watching at home, hello.
Do we have a 7-second budget?
In case one of us makes a
When I was a kid, they would look and go, hi Johnny, hi Bobby, hi Mary, hi Sue, you know, and then at home we'd go, they know me. It was black and white TV, and it was a long time
So
ago.
we don't have a delay in which we can censor comments, just so you know.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Councilman, oh, life goes so much better when you have writers and musical accompaniment. First of all, let's go to minutes. You have minutes from the September 26th in your packet. Is that okay with everybody? Is that shaking his head a yes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second
A
that.
motion second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries, thank you very much. Under visitor and public comment, Mr. Patton. How's that for getting to you right away?
You bet. Good. How about give me 15 minutes?
Please keep the 3 minutes.
I know.
Thank you, sir, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the licensing changes you've got. I personally think that they're necessary and will, make the process work. You're not touching any of the important parts of the license. I'm really not sure why that was in there. And also licensing, I was looking around the other day and I found some articles. One of them was sort of caught my eye, and that was Huntington in Oregon has imposed a marijuana business license, and their fee is $5,000 a year, and $5,000 renewable. So just curiosity, you might have missed a little source of income there. These guys make as much money as they say they do. The other thing I'd like information on is we've been reading in the paper today how the Oregon finally kicked loose the tax money. And have we received, or do we know how much we are going to receive? And have we gotten it yet? No. I saw the...
I think, well, you want me to respond to this?
Would you
Yeah,
care?
so the answer is, no, I don't know how much, but I do believe we've received, and I wish, but our finance director's not here tonight, so I can't. I've been asking the same question, so,
I bet you have.
yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'd all like to hear that.
Yeah, I think so.
And like to hear your comments on if it's worth it or not, once it does show up.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all
Appreciate
I
it.
have to say.
Thanks for
Mr.
coming.
Patton, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You were one of the leading vocal voices.
Agitators.
Oh, I don't think so. Relative to some of the engineering things about the marijuana plant or the grow site, what was your understanding as far as the noise testing? Who did you think was going to do the testing?
Well, your guy that did the evaluation of the application misread severely the DEQ's requirements. And the standard practice is that if there's an issue that the Oregon Environmental Quality would do them, but I don't believe they're doing them anymore. And I would have expected that the applicant would have been required to have performed the initial testing under the direction of a licensed engineer in the field. And then the city, if there was an issue, or maybe even the applicant afterwards, I'm not sure, repeat the testing under the direction of a licensed engineer.
Okay, but first it would be the applicant's responsibility to do that with the license.
It usually is something like
That's
that.
how it
If
is.
you have to do soil samples, the applicant does the soil sampling.
Okay. I didn't know. I wanted to find out. Okay.
As you know, the air park has done their own.
Well, I heard that, yeah.
And I think we shared it with the city, I'm not sure. We did. But we have data, and it's damn quiet out there. Okay.
Thanks so much, appreciate that. Any other visitor comment at this point? Yes, sir. Good evening and welcome to council.
Well, thank you. My name is John Bodwitz. I just wanted to address a comment that was made, not this last meeting, but the meeting before by one of the city employees. He said something about he didn't know why people were getting upset over a little 2.5% water bill increase. And I think he made mention of something about how they spend hundreds of dollars on cell phones and things like that. My response to that would be, number one, buying a cell phone is a choice. This raise is not. Number two, if people aren't aware of it, there's a lot of citizens in this community that are on public assistance and or just over to where sometimes it's even worse when you can't get any assistance. And number three, if the 2.5% isn't very much, why not do a decrease and let's see how that goes. But my other thing is it's not just a 2.5% water increase. It's a 2.5% water increase every year for the next 5 years, a 5.5% increase on our sewer bill every year for the next 5 years. It's seeing our franchise fees going up on all of our utilities. It's having some of the highest taxes in Polk County. And one of the things I was thinking of also is if all this stuff is going to pay for city services and things like that, I would think that would be covered by our property taxes. And I can write my property taxes off on my taxes and get some of that back. But if I'm paying for all these services through franchise fees and increases and paying for city halls and MyNet and my water bill, I can't claim any of that. So I kind of feel like I'm kind of getting ripped off there. So that's my response to his comment. And I kind of think in the future, if city employees or anybody else are allowed to make personal comments, we need to make the public comments available more often during the meeting.
Thank you, appreciate you taking the time to come in. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to continue moving forward on the agenda, and I think we have on the schedule here is the rate study update from Mr. Donovan.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have one thing under visitor comments.
Yes, oh, excuse me, please do.
Yes. The city council received some emails from resident Victoria Kruljak, and she asked that those be put in the official record under visitor comments. And so they are, I just want to let the council know they are. They are now part of the packet.
Thank you, appreciate that, council members. That was electronically sent to you in advance. Okay, thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I think we're under a rate study update is what's listed on my agenda. Please. Good evening, Mr. Donovan. Welcome to City Council.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. Steve Donovan, 9600 Southwest Oak, Suite 335, Portland, Oregon 97223. In your packets tonight is a draft final report for the rate study. This is pretty comprehensive, and what we've done tonight, can you put it on, Karen, on slideshow mode?
Sorry.
You've got a brief PowerPoint.
I don't have.
Okay, that's fine. Last month, we spent quite a bit of your time talking about the business plan for the utilities. And that was the definition of how much are we going to need to make the systems work. Tonight, we're going to talk about where do we get the money from to fund the plan. In other words, the rate side of the equation, which we're going to come back tonight. So the summary of monthly recommendations, and we've got some good news for you tonight, by the way. We're going to talk about demand and the customer demographics, who pays and what your community is really made up of. Who are your customers? I'm not sure that you've all ever seen that in any extensive detail, but it's pretty interesting. And then we're going to show you two things. My recommendation for the rate profile versus the cost of service analysis. What the mathematics of the plan call for the rates. And they're different, and I'll tell you why. And that'll be for both water and sewer, and then we'll talk about next steps. So, forecast of system changes and revenue requirements, and this will be our rate recommendation to you. And last month we talked to you 2.5% on water And last month we said 5.5% on wastewater. We've got the good news on wastewater is it's going to be 4.15%. And the reason for that is we had a meeting with the Oregon DEQ, Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program, 3 weeks ago. Folks from the Northwest region in Portland, plus Eugene, and you have been qualified. Your project has been placed on the intended use plan, and it will be funded with the DEQ SRF loan, which the manager will be coming back with a victory lap, I suspect, here pretty soon. A 30-year loan at 2%. Last month we talked about a 20-year loan at 2.5%. So the stated rate on the loan is 1.48%, and the DEQ will charge 0.5% fee on principal outstanding for an effective rate of 1.98%. So well done. This is very good, and it brought the rate profile down a full 1.35 percentage points over the 5-year term, as the gentleman had just said. So this is a very good development, and we're real pleased. You have qualified for the small community program versus what I had shown last month was the overall program, the retail side of their program. So let's talk about demand and who your customers are. Water. There are a total of 2,440 water meters in service. And of those meters, as you can see here, the preponderance, 95%, are residential meters. You are a monolithic customer base. You don't have a diversified breakdown between residential, commercial, and industrial like a large Seattle or San Francisco or Portland would have. You are effectively a single-family residential community. The balance of the meters are multifamily and industrial, and you have that, see that 1 6-inch meter? That's actually a large apartment complex here in town. Water sales in fiscal 16-17. You sold 35.4 million cubic feet of water. That's 265 million gallons. For those spatial people out there, that's the equivalent of 401 Olympic swimming pools full of water that you sold to customers. Now, as I said, 95% of the meters in service are 3/4 inch. 99.4% of the water is sold to in-city customers. A very small amount is sold outside. This is very common. 43% of all the water is sold between June and September. Now, this is important because there is seasonality to water, and that makes sense. In the summertime, you sell more water than in the winter. So, in 1/3 of the year, you generate 43% of your water revenues. That's why last month I was harping on you. You had 90 days of operating revenues as a reserve. That's for the seasonality issue. Citywide peaking factor. Now, this is extremely important from an engineering standpoint, is 1.465, and I'm going to speak to that a little more detail on why peaking factors are important. First of all, what is a peaking factor? It's the ratio of the maximum month daily demand divided by the average annual daily demand. And the reason this is important from a planning standpoint is the higher the peaking factor, the more we have to invest in storage to meet that simultaneous peak demand. And when we talk about that simultaneous peak demand is the hottest day of the year in August, having fire on both sides of town, having irrigation supply, and keeping 20 pounds of hydrostatic pressure in the system at all times. That calls for a lot of storage. If we can bring that peak down, we can mitigate the future capital investments. Like your customer was talking about, it's 2.5% per year every year. If we can mitigate the demand on the system, we can mitigate the future capital improvements required on the system. Now, what this chart shows is the peaking factors of communities in the western Oregon where I have done the rate studies and I know these peaking factors are correct. And yours is very low. And what that leads me to believe is two things. There's a demographic factor here, that there are folks that are fixed incomes and probably don't water their lawns in the summertime, mitigating that peak. And then second, the preponderance of your lots are fairly small relative to the large suburban lots that we see out there. But if you'll notice the two bars, the long ones with the very high peaking factors, Dallas in 2011 and Silverton in 2007, those peaking factors are sort of outside the norm. It's because when we did those rate studies, those communities made policy decisions to lower their water rates in the summertime. Their thinking was, we want to give customers a break because they use a lot of water in the summer, so we'll lower the rate. Well, that's counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to conserve water so that we can manage the system better. And both of those communities have since changed their rate structures to have either flat rates all through the year or what we call inverted block rates, where the more you use, the more you pay as you go out across that demand curve. So, total wastewater active customers, 2,220 residential and multifamily EDUs, equivalent dwelling units. Those are the demand units equivalent to a single-family home. We have 3 residential EDUs outside the city. That is rare. Most communities, from an urban services standpoint, require that if you connect to our sewer system, you must annex to our city. So this is, yeah, it's not a lot of them, but it's rare. Usually that's a condition of connection. 147 commercial EDUs, so 2,370, and you'll say, well, shouldn't we have the same number of water connections that we have sewer connections? The answer is no. It's very common that they're different. 94% are residential, 6% are commercial. This is a little geeky, but it's important when we talk about the wastewater system and we're doing a mass balance on the system. And what this looks at is, and we've sent this on to the city's engineers, we have the luxury of interrogating the billing system, so we have a very good idea of how much water people purchase from you and then ended up in the wastewater system. Plus, we also know from reports at the wastewater treatment plant how much water actually came to the wastewater treatment plant. So we can do a balance of, obviously what I'm driving at here is we know what we put into the system metered and we know what we got at the plant. The difference has to be infiltration and inflow. And that's an extremely important issue because it's a very high cost to you. And as you can see here, 360 million gallons were shown up at the wastewater treatment plant, but only 226 million came from customers. So 63% of all the flows that went to the wastewater treatment plant were from customers, and 37% was from infiltration and inflow. So what that means on a flow basis is for every gallon that we put into the system, 1.58 gallons showed up at the plant. That's the ratio. And now you say, okay, Steve, so what? What does that mean? Well, that's actually pretty darn good for communities your size. And that reflects the fact that since the 1980s, you've invested heavily in I&I abatement. Remember all of those interceptors, maybe you might remember, you used to have interceptors that ran along the river. Those interceptors were decommissioned and pump stations were put in to intercept that flow and get it away from those low-lying wet areas so we weren't taking groundwater back to the plant. That's a very good thing. From a BOD, from an organic material standpoint, we had 518,000 pounds of BOD show up at the plant. 378,000 pounds came from customers, so 73% of the pounds came from metered consumption, 27% came from I&I. And then from total suspended solids, it's even better. 94% came from the customer class, 6% came from I&I. This is, like I say, pretty geeky, but what I wanted to find out, because when I built the rates, I'm charging you for I&I, and it's one of the most expensive components of the sewer business is not treating the wastewater, it's pushing the water around. It's pumping water from here to there, it's storing water, all those lagoons, all that cost, that's all related to storing and handling water. And from this chart, what you can see here is the strength of the sewage that shows up at the wastewater treatment plant is actually weaker than the wastewater that we put into the system because I&I dilutes the strength of the wastewater. And that's also fairly common in this business. Now, let's talk about recommended water rates versus the cost of service analysis. The gentleman had said, that came up here, and he rightfully so, said, costs of water are going up, and they're going up every year, and your current customer with 10 CCF, that's 1,000 cubic feet of water that he uses on a month, is $63.80. That's 0.8 of 1 cent per gallon.
Is that what our average customer uses?
That's what your average customer uses. He's paying 0.8 of 1 cent per gallon for the water. I think that's good value, but that's, once again, something for you to consider. Now, this blue line is the cost of service analysis rates. And what the cost of service analysis indicates is that instead of that customer paying $63.80 a month, based on the plan that we showed you last month, we should raise that rate up to $74.34. So, but look at the shape of that curve. We would raise this guy's bill $10 a month and then pretty much hold it flat for 5 years. We don't need to do that. And the reason it's being flat is the costs of the plan you saw last month were going up, but you didn't see what the customer base was doing at that time. And we've got the customer base growing at about 2% per year. So even though the numerator is growing, the denominator is growing also, which is mitigating that quotient. So why on earth would we raise somebody's rate $10 a month and then hold that rate flat for 5 years? Well, I would make that recommendation if you were in trouble. If you weren't making your bond covenants or if you didn't have any reserves. And neither of those cases are true. You are making your bond covenants and you do have reserves. So what I suggest you consider doing, and my recommendation, is we follow that 2.5% per year glide path. By the end of the 5th year, we're approaching our cost of service level, but we're doing it at a more rational level. And that blue line assumes that every dollar that's in the plan is expended when the plan says it is, and every project that's in the plan gets built when it says. That never happens. And you've got reserves and you've got planning in your pocket, so that I think the red line makes a whole bunch more sense versus running up to the cost of service analysis. But at the end of the 5th year, we're approaching that same point. For the wastewater, current customer pays $45.99 a month for unlimited use of the wastewater system. Your rates are flat for the residential customers, 95% of your customers. So that's unlimited use of the wastewater system for $45.99 a month. Now you can see the cost of service-based rate profile says we should run that up to $54.41, so we'll raise it about $8.50 a month. Once again, you don't have to do that. But the interesting thing about the blue line here is you can see, even though we've got the customer base growing, it is starting to trend upward. Not severely, but it is trending upward. That's because we're going to be taking on debt that we talked about last month. We will be taking on debt in the future. That's going to be adding to your cost profile in excess of your growth rate, so that the unit charges will grow over time based on the cost of service analysis. But at 4.15% per year, less than what we talked about last month, we'll get you there by the end of the 5th year, but in a much more manageable fashion. So the red line is our recommendation to you. So next steps, we're going to finalize the water and wastewater report. We've got a draft on the report now. We'll take a week to accept comments, and then I will give the report to the manager, and he'll probably post it on the website, I suspect. Continue work on acquisition of the senior in-stream Willamette River water rights, and I know you're making progress on that area. And then you're going to see a snowstorm of paperwork coming your way with respect to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan. Now that you're on the intended use plan, you will fall into the next cycle of approval, and you'll have to have your loan documents presented to be just like taking out a mortgage. You've done this before. This isn't new to you. And as I said, it'll be a 30-year loan, effectively at 2% interest, and you've been approved for $5,966,930, which is the phase 1 project, almost in its entirety. And then our recommendation is to you on January 1, 2018, you raise water rates 2.53% across the board and 4.14% for wastewater. Thank you.
Questions for the presenter?
What that breaks down to, because I was sitting here doing the math for my own pocketbook, is $4.26 a month for both services.
Sound about right?
All right.
Mr. Klein?
Just a reminder, we will be coming back to you. We will accept the report with any comments that you may have. but we will coming back to you in our normal cycle in December for a recommended, the actual resolution to address rates and have a public comment on those rates at that time.
And this will be done the same way it's been done in the past, where every year we'll look at it again and
Right.
look at the other financial situations and.
Exactly, but absent changes, dramatic changes to what is going on in our spending and our revenue streams, this is what you can expect, roughly expect year in, year out for the next 4 to 5 years.
And that's probably why last month I kind of was such a pain in your neck talking about, we need to get this plan, because we can't make rates until we have a plan. Well, now you've got a plan, and now deviations from the plan can be evaluated against the plan. And that's kind of how you run a business.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, you didn't say anything about how we could reduce the costs. First, we have to make an assumption, and that is we need the water, the drinkable water, and we need to do what we're doing, and we need to have more sewer capacity. So we've established that need, as long as everybody's in agreement with that. Then the question would be, what about doing things that so we don't have to do that? I know that 27 to 37% water leaking into our sewer system. You said that doesn't sound bad. I think it sounds terrible. And especially at a time when I can feed cable through a pipe, I can take pictures. I should be able to know where it's coming from, unless there's somebody illegally dumping, which I don't think is the case. So isn't that something that I know we looked at before? We were doing that on a basis.
So that is correct, and we do address all of those issues, and we do that with our master planning processing. So we do a 20-year facility plan for each facility, and we also do a 5-year capital plan. Steve's job is not necessarily to dissect that plan to see if we're making the correct choices. We do that together with you during the budget cycle. We do that with our engineers and with our staff. So we are fully conscious of both the cost of I&I and in the wastewater system leakage in the water system, but we're also fully conscious of what our priorities need to be in terms of keeping our overall costs down. You can spend a lot of money chasing a leak without having a major impact on the cost of doing business. So what we have done in our capital plan is choose the most cost-effective routes to make the biggest dent in our long-range costs, as opposed to addressing each and every I&I. The valley is I&I. I mean, we receive in the peak of winter, we're accepting between 10 and 11 times the volume of water in our wastewater plant versus the amount of water we put through in our water system. That it just leaks. That's the nature of our historic systems. So we're spending money, and we sit down with our engineers, we sit down with you on an annual basis at budget time and go through the capital planning, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, is figure out where we can put limited resources to make the most bang for the buck.
$7 million or more isn't limited.
No.
I'll take your word for it. I'm not a sanitary engineer or whatever it is, but to me, running a cable down a pipe and doing it in a systematic way makes sense.
We would be happy, and I think it's probably more of a study session format, but we'd be happy to bring our engineers back for a conversation about the planning and how the resources are allocated over the course of the planning cycle. Just because I know you weren't there for all the development of those plans, but I think the whole council maybe would like the refresher as well. So if you'd like that in a future study session, we're happy to do that, bring the engineers in and have that conversation.
Sure, as long as they're open-minded and willing to share what the opportunities are.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anything else to add? Okay. Let's keep moving forward. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate your presentation. We're now down to reports and presentations, so I guess I get the first one. Just to keep people informed, in a little over 2 years, there will be a census, and it's very important for counting everybody, and that is a process that takes some years in advance to do. At the Polk County mayors, city managers, and county commissioners and related government officials meeting, we had a presentation by Todd on the census and preparation for the census, and it does take a lot to make sure you count everybody. And in our last census, because of some efforts that we took here, we were able to pick up a number of people who normally wouldn't have been counted. So that's an ongoing process, and it's pretty important. You'll probably hear us talk a little bit more about the census coming up in the incoming months of the coming year. So just letting you know that. Other part is recently, I know several counselors were able to attend the League of Oregon Cities Conference in Portland, where the 241 cities, I think 145 or so cities were represented, and 500 to 600 mayors and city council members were there, and Councilor Martin, Councilor Martin Willis were able to attend, and I was pleased to be able to do a presentation there. And, a lot of good stuff happened, and we were able to recognize some wonderful people also. So I just wanted to, and I should also, City Manager Klein was also in attendance. And, so thank you for folks. You'll be next September. It's a good place to go. It's a very good learning opportunity. Mr. City Manager, I think you have the next portion of our agenda.
Mayor, members of council, thank you. So, in response to the concern that was raised earlier, I just want to say that I do, unfortunately he's not here to hear this, but I do apologize for the comments that were made. I think it became a training opportunity, and it's been addressed, so you know. We're not insensitive to what the impact on anybody is of what these rates do. I for one live in the community like you do, and so I've experienced it in my own household. So, we would love to keep it flat or even reduced if it was possible to do so, but honestly, it's not. So yeah, and the mayor's correct. I was at the League of Cities conference as well. We had a lot of interesting sessions. Frankly, it was a very good conference. I think Councilor Morton was there as well. And Councilor, thank you, Councilor Martin Wills was there as well. Yes, you were. So I think we had a lot of great sessions there. There was a lot that I was able to participate or attend with respect to homelessness and affordable housing. There was some tours in Portland. One of the tours that I went on was the actual facilities they have in place. It's frankly very heartbreaking on the one hand, but it's also sort of interesting to see how the issues are at least being addressed in Portland. There is some management of the problem. That said, it really is a much bigger problem than cities and even state resources are able to effectively address. We really need a partner in the federal government for the problem. But that said, there are things going on. We too have engaged in that discussion, and we'll be doing more so with the Council of Governments and their new staff hire when that's completed. So that's ongoing. Anyway, it was an excellent conference, and well worth the price of attendance. So, by the way, those of you, I think everybody was there for the noontime presentation on Saturday of the Lincoln portrayal. Did an amazing job, and he will be here in our community sometime around President's Day. I think at the high school auditorium, so in the evening. So in fact, there may be 2 appearances in Polk County. I think the Polk County Heritage Museum is also arranging an appearance. It's a wonderful, wonderful portrayal. Definitely worth seeing. We are good to go with the Mechanico project. We were paid, we agreed to the terms as council presented them, so we're off and running. We will expect full payment next September. So let's see. The old City Hall, we will receive that there's a hearing. Well, we expect to receive. There's a hearing in bankruptcy at the end of October. We think that will be the final hearing on this matter, and we should receive some partial payment on the judgment that we have outstanding on the prior tenancy on that project. We expect to get permission this month from ODOT to proceed on F Street Bridge. That's a $2 million grant, 2 to 3 years to see that through to completion. So that's ongoing. Couple different things. Let's see, in the field of engineering, we have the water rights work is ongoing. We've received the executed agreements, so we will be starting the diligence process. So sometime either towards the end of this fiscal year or the beginning of next, we expect to close on that agreement, have to come up with a remainder balance, and acquire those water rights, and we were anxious to get that done for the future of the community. We have out a request for proposals for an engineer of record for the city. That's a little bit new. That is part of the reorganization. When we eliminated the position of community development director, we brought in contract planning, and we are bringing in a contract engineer to do the work that was otherwise sort of within one department. We always had contract planning. It's a little bit more intense now than it had been. And we're adding the engineer of record to do the engineering work, so that'll be on an hourly consultant basis. That RFP is out there, and we will have an engineer, and I believe that's coming to you for approval toward, I think it's your November 6th meeting is when we have that scheduled. Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what our timing is. So talked about that. We're expecting plans and processing now on the hotel work. That's moving forward. We will have something in front of the planning commission in early November. They will come back to you. We think in your November 20.
The second meeting.
Second meeting, whatever that date is. I don't have it open in front of me. But the second meeting of November, so the planning commission will have a special date for their hearing because of the notice requirements. It'll be back to you about a week later for your consideration, assuming that the plan, well, regardless of whether the planning commission approves or disapproves, it's on your calendar. So that's coming forward. The development team is pressing to move forward quickly. They're anxious to get started. And of course, we're anxious to have them get started, so that's all good news. So we're working with them closely. Tree trimming starts next week. Notice went out in October, the River City Briefs, and we expect 2 to 3 weeks and 5 Public Works employees for completion of this effort. So that's clearing up the sidewalks of low-hanging trees and streets of low-hanging trees. So there's been a lot of work. That'll be a lot of work. The Riverview Sewer Lift Station upgrade projects, that's final review for design and bid documents, so that will be going out as part of the overall package of improvements that will be coming to you in short order. That was what Steve was talking about, that $5.9 million worth of loan funds that have been approved by the state. And I believe that loan included a forgivable portion, so that's also good news. It basically is a grant design, shown up as a forgivable loan. So we've had a number of people participate in diversity training this week as well as this past week, and I think that was an eye-opener for several of them, and I think that was good. Not that their eyes weren't open. Suggest otherwise. I think it's an intense training process. I went through it last year. It shows you things about yourself you didn't realize. That didn't sound so great either. But anyway, it was good training. I'm just looking here and trying to streamline my report to you. Airstream event, those of you, I assume, were in town on Saturday and saw that. That I think went off really great. And we have the good news. It looks like they're coming back next year. That was a really fun event. That was nicely done. They really showed well. I loved the little fire put up on the plaza. That was kind of interesting. Anyway, that's going. That went off fine. Sean spoke at a broadband conference in Hammond. Hammond. Don't know where that one is.
Idaho Falls.
There you go. And launching the municipal fiber system. They wanted someone to talk about how rural communities can utilize broadband. And then just in general, we're seeing tons of activity downtown with business, buildings, and development. Some of that we'll engage in our conversation later. So that's my brief of my report. Any questions I can answer at this point? I think I have the next item as well.
Okay, let's continue moving forward, please.
This is the Independence Landing report, and actually I'm going to ask Sean and Steve Ward, both our project manager, to join me up here for any questions, but let me reopen my iPad, get to that report. But What you have is, my periodic report to you about the status of the project and the related work, both the private and the public work. Now I've added the park work to that as well. I'm not going to repeat what's in my staff report. I know there were some questions about. We have a specific request to you about the IFA loan funds. We've talked to you a bit about this a little bit before, but I know we're going to test your memory a little on that. So we're going to repeat that information to you here and why we chose the way we went to. And I'll let Sean, address the particulars of that request to you. And again, we have Steve here if you have any questions, particularly about the public work that's ongoing, which is pretty much wrapping up here in short order. So I'll let Sean pick up the piece on the funding, if you will.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So it has been a while since we first started this infrastructure effort. So I want to kind of step back, and when we first approached you about doing this infrastructure work, our cost estimate projection was $3.5 million. What we ended up doing as we were looking at the Special Public Works Fund, which is where we got our loan financing from, they have kind of one process up to $3 million, and once you get over $3 million, a much more extensive and time-consuming process for approval of the financing. With that in mind, we looked at our scope of work and essentially said, is there a good way to split this project into two phases to get it under $3 million? And really, we felt like there was, because there's a lot of the underground and the base work that needs to get done right up front. But then there's a lot of the finishing work that frankly is better done after the development is in place or as it's being finalized, so you don't have equipment running over sidewalks and landscaping and things like that. So we ended up moving forward with the first phase, which was under $3 million. We were the beneficiaries of frankly a very good bidding climate. We got really good bids. And so we were able to get the originally projected work done and significantly more. It was good enough that we started looking at it going, okay, can we get everything that we wanted to get in phases 1 and 2? So from there, we essentially took that up and developed a list of kind of there were some other issues that came up along the way, primarily revolving around parking in the downtown and being able to create additional public parking downtown. So we took everything that we originally were looking at doing, factored in those new issues, and then basically ran through a kind of a wants and needs analysis. What has to get done, and what would be nice to get done if we have the capacity to. The result of that is what's in front of you tonight. We did. So I'll walk through it real quick. You have essentially all the work that you see that's been done so far. That's in the contracted column. The work remaining to be done, as I mentioned, is primarily related to parking. So we have the old City Hall parking lot that does not include demolishing the City Hall, essentially repaving, creating a little bit of landscaping in that parking lot. We have the Lot 7 parking lot, which is behind the Basement and the Elks. That was part of the agreement that we made with the Main Street property owners about rear access to the property. That will be a public parking lot. There's some EV charging, lighting, and landscaping relating to those parking lots as well. And then a portion of a water line on D Street, which will help really loop in both the Independence Landing, Main Street businesses to deliver more water, and it will also benefit the Independence Station property, which, as you know, is also getting ready to kick off. There's another sort of column or category below that, which is some frontage improvements on lots 1 through 4. That's work that we are continuing to withhold because, as I said, we don't want to do sidewalks, landscaping, some of the fine details on the development side of Osprey Lane at this time. We'd rather let them run around with their heavy equipment and without having our nice finished product there to squish. So, for lack of a better term. So that's really how this breaks down. I would know we left off about $750,000 worth of other projects relating to street work, kind of finishing the Main Street streetscapes, the old City Hall streetscape, things like that we would really like to be able to do. We just didn't feel like we're justified at this time with this particular process. All that to say, coming back to the original request, that, you know, we can get all this work done for basically a total cost of, we're asking to bump up to 2.9 million from 2.65. We still feel like this is a great savings, frankly, because our original estimate was $3.5 million. There's a little bit of, it can get a little tricky because we did also get a $250,000 grant, which I'm not kind of factoring into this. But that's the request before you, is to bump up our Special Public Works Fund financing request by an additional $250,000 to cover these last pieces to finish the project.
Questions for staff?
Yes. When I add up all the items in yellow, it adds up to 850,000.
840?
840, excuse me.
And then the 60
And
was,
60,000 contingency.
that wasn't yellow.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're asking for a bump up of 250,000 additional, how does that jive with the 840 that's on there?
So,
Committed today is 2.349. So if you add that in together, those numbers, they end up with that, you end up with 3.1.
so you end up at 3.249, which is the total down there.
So you add the 250.
So there's money left in the original loan amount that you haven't spent?
Yes, we have not completely spent out the original
There's a
2.65.
portion of also that's going to come from bond funds, the remaining water bond funds that are being reprogrammed for the D Street water line.
Yeah,
So
so
that's what the numbers don't entirely.
yeah, the D Street water line is listed as 240,000, but all of that will not be put against this Special Public Works financing.
Okay. Frankly, my opinion is that we have spent a lot already on this, and if we can do this in chunks, in an extended time frame, and be able to handle it through either grants, or as you say, there was a $250,000 grant not factored in, the $240,000 for the water line is going to possibly come out of some other funding, or there's other funding available. I'd rather see the cap not keep going up and up on this. I think we can time these things differently and fund them differently than adding more to this.
So with regard to the grant, you'll see the grand total contracted items 1 through 8 line references 3.29 million. So that does include the $250,000 grant. Essentially what we do is when you back out that 250, back out another about 100,000 from the bond payments for the water line, and that would get you to the 2.9.
Okay. Well, I'm, you know, we just had a presentation that there's going to be a $5 million bump for the sewer planning, and I know that's apples and oranges, but it's still money out of pocket.
So let me say that there's some different things. So one, much of this money is going to the lot, what we're calling Lot 7, even though it's no longer very much on Lot 7. So that's the agreement we just struck with the Elks, the Masons, and the individual property owners to put in parking behind Main Street. So you're asking that we not do that work now?
Did we strike the agreement with them based on city council approving more loan?
We struck the agreement based on the council doing the parking lot, the city doing the parking lot, as part of this overall project. So pulling that now, I think, would be bad faith.
Okay.
The
Well,
D Street water line helps it's matched by bond funds. We need to spend those funds anyway, and it also supports, it supports both improved water service in town, and frankly, it supports Independent Station as part of the work to get that project completed. I'm looking to see if there's anything really, I guess street trees or landscape is what we think that if you're going to do a parking lot, you should complete the look of the look, and that's really a small piece of this.
Question?
The other work,
Excuse me, I didn't.
Go on.
the other work is contracted work with the development agreement. All
So-
the 3 to 4 items below lots 1 through 4, we're required to do that under our development. So there's very little that we can take off the table at this point. And again, all this was within the original budget, it was all presented to you. It was strategic in how we timed it. But this is less than what we told you, this is less than what we told the state. So at this point, that's how we built the entire project and pro forma. It doesn't really make sense to take any of this off the table, frankly.
So let me ask a question, because there was a question about hunking and timing, because this is all not simultaneous, is that correct? Because as you pointed out, some of this is getting the financing all in place. And then so some of this is going to happen earlier, and then some of it's going to happen later.
Well, actually, most of it will happen in the context of one contract, which is other than the development improvements. But those things that are both the lot 1 through 4, we expect to put that out in one contract, and you can save, and we expect to save money by doing so. If we separate these out into separate contracts, one, we may not have the funding source available, and two, we will at least have mobilization of each and every project that will be an added cost. I was assuming that we could get somebody in.
I was putting the yellow in, the top yellow group and the bottom of the yellow group. That was what I was asking, as opposed to individual lines.
Well, and 1 through 4 isn't even yellow down here.
Oh, well, okay, so the two yellow groups. That was just what I was checking on the front of it.
Other questions that people have? I have a question about the parking lot behind the old city hall. We haven't really made a decision what we're doing with the property anyway.
We're really just, what we want to do there is freshen up, resurface, restripe, redesign the flow of traffic in that lot, just so it becomes an adequate, public parking lot, signage and some landscaping over there, just so that we have, a decent public parking lot that we can point people to. Right now, it's cracked pavement. We have a problem with, we need to do something about the tree that's between us and the post office. So it's an opportunity to solve a problem that's there, add to the parking inventory that we desperately need downtown, and $100,000 is really not very much.
Except that wasn't in the original plan for this project, was it?
You can pull it.
Yeah, so, and I guess I would add, we have, through previous conversations with you all, when we've been talking to folks about the old city hall, we've been saying that we're going to be retaining that back parking lot, but that's a separate tax lot, and we want to retain that for public parking. So that the disposition of the old city hall shouldn't affect one way or the other, though, that back parking area. And then, as David said, the idea was to basically invest in it and get that back up to par and turn it into a true public lot.
And I would add that the urban renewal district will be on the hook for the repayment of this, city general funds.
Still the general pocket, isn't it?
It's the incremental tax finance that we get off the project development.
Councilor Jacobs, did you get the question answered?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from this side of the room? Okay.
Anything else from staff?
So the way the loan is structured, is it one of those that you borrow what you need and pay that, or do you borrow a chunk and then pay it back?
We borrow, so when we've completed the work, that starts the clock on the monies that we've borrowed. That's the first 3. We have basically a window of interest only, and then after 3 years, we have principal and interest, and that continues on at that point in time. So we have I believe there's a.
I was just going to say, I think, more to your question, so if we are approved for 2.9 and we only spend 2.7, then we only have a loan for 2.7.
Yes, that's
correct.
But no,
It's like a construction loan, you convert to a permanent loan when you're done here.
So let me make sure so if I was to state this, let me see how I want to make sure. So what the original project came in at one level. We've had additional savings from a variety of reasons. And you chunked it so that we would get the best situation. And then so while we're still under what was originally discussed at the very beginning, we were able to get all the pieces that we wanted, and so we were cautious up front, and then so we now have the opportunity to get all the pieces that we wanted to have done, and still be under what we had originally discussed for the total cost of the project, and doing it with all the correct bells and whistles.
I think that's a fair summary.
Okay.
Won't you have to go back and get some more money to be able to do the curbing and the stuff that's required for lots 5 through 8 or 9?
That work is actually done. So that's what's done on the east side of Osprey, or west side of Osprey Lane. It's the east side that we've left undone at this point in time, pending the development plans and the developer doing his work. Some private developer will come in on lots 5, 6, 7, and maybe 8, and if there's changes that need to be made, it'll be made at their nickel.
That'd be relatively small, so, okay.
Yeah.
So it's the total stuff that isn't done because we don't know exactly what's gonna happen.
Right, and we don't want to waste the work at this point in time.
Yeah.
Additional questions for staff? Okay, counselors, this is an action item. Someone will suggest action. Michael?
Okay, I move to approve resolution number 17-1465.
I have a motion
I'll second.
and I have a second. Is there discussion? I hear no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
Okay, Counselor Morton is a no. Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Klein, I think you have the next item.
This is informational, and it's available to act on this evening if you choose to, but this was, in essence, we took what we understood your direction on possible changes to the code language for the marijuana licensing. And so let me just pull the staff report very quickly. They're fairly limited. So those changes are limited essentially to pulling out the information relative to criminal histories that are submitted to, that are already submitted to the state. What we're looking for is the certifications instead that the businesses assured us are available. So this is requiring that those be available to us, those certifications from the state. It removes from the ordinance requirements the testing laboratories, as I don't believe that was your intent originally to have them under. And then it also eliminates the odor requirements on the retail land, at the retail premises for both medical and recreational marijuana. Again, it's, I think as we've learned in the process, that was really not relevant. Other than that, it makes very few changes. I think you heard earlier that from one gentleman from the air park, he did not have concerns with it, and we recognize that's where a lot of these concerns are coming from, and we wanted, so it's good to be on track with that. So I think this is available to you to act on if you choose. If you want to mull it over more, give us further direction, we're happy to take that. Otherwise, you're welcome to act on that this evening, and Karen will supply the language to move that forward.
There were a couple of people who were in the marijuana business here locally that came out and talked about this. Has this been ran by them? I'd like to hear what they have to say about it.
We have not passed a draft of this back to them, but we think we addressed the issues that were raised. So if you think that's helpful, we're
Is that
happy to.
okay? or-
Well, we can do that, but I think some of us might be able to add.
Yes,
Because
I-
several of us, I'm going to go with Counselor Morton first, and I think we might be able to answer your question.
Three things. First of all, thank you to Mr. Patton for coming in and making his comments, because that was helpful to hear. I don't want to characterize this that only the air park had objections to things, or that was mainly the source of the comment. I think they were maybe the more vocal group, but probably expressing what a lot of other people had thought, whether they lived in the air park or not. And third, after our last meeting where this was brought up, I did go spend, and I'm sure there's all kinds of rumors running around town now, but I went and spent a morning at the dispensary so I could watch business being done and under what protections they had in place, what kind of process they went through with the buying and selling, the labeling, the restrictions that were put on, the way that the security had to be maintained throughout, and also had a continuing discussion with the owner of the business. And I was extremely impressed with how tight it is and how careful everything is. And there are licenses all over the walls saying that this person has been certified and that person has had training. And also that we did talk about, because it had been that person who'd been in here in the meeting prior expressing concerns about that. And when when I continued my discussion with her, she was very much on board with the changes that we were talking about, because what it was eliminating was dual processes that were already done for the state and did not necessarily need to be done a second time for the city. So I felt like there was a good agreement, and like I said, I was impressed at the care with which business is done.
I'm going to follow that. I also went over on a separate time and had a very similar experience and asked about reporting on employees and how it handled and what's covered and when you have to report things. And then I had the opportunity to visit with the OLCC folks directly and ask, and they do not share their information. They said they can't because it's a state law that they can't. And but that if they issue a certificate that says this person's okey-dokey, technical term. And I felt real good about that. And the rest of it probably restatement for council.
I talked to OLCC at League of Oregon Cities also, and that was very affirmative.
Right, and so it seems to make sense to all parties, and there's no reason to duplicate.
Correct.
Additional questions for staff?
Well, maybe
Please do.
one for you. One of my questions was about the OLCC or the Oregon Health Authority. If it's a business that's not in good standing, do they kind of notify the city that, we're having troubles, we're having issues with this business, or how does that work?
I don't. I'm going to look at somebody else who probably has a better answer, but I know that they jump on. For their they jump on this pretty hard. Is my impression, but I don't. I didn't ask that exact question. I'm going to look. Chief doesn't have any additional. And I'm not sure, Mr. Klein, do you have any additional?
I don't have any.
Okay. My impression, though, is that they're pretty hardcore on this stuff, and all the way around, and because they know they're under the microscope everywhere.
My guess, and it's purely that, is that the state would work directly with the business. That I don't know that they are prone to share a lot of information with us that they don't have to.
Yeah. So.
Well, I recall when we had the representative from the local business, one of the questions that I had asked was, in the event that one of their licensed employees has some sort of a violation, is that then revoked similar to the whole child care registry? And we got an affirmative response to that. So we know that if there are problems with staff, that staff would then,
Right away.
upon revocation, be removed from the business. So I think that's your first line of defense in having business issues, is you get rid of the bad seed, so to speak.
Is there, well, I feel that we're on the right track with this. Looks pretty good. I did have a couple little technical questions. We talk about exempting testing and laboratories, but if we envisioned a facility that grew some of their own plants to test, how would that be covered, or would that be covered as a grow operation, or? And
Again, I don't know the answer. I think that, at some point in time, that distinction would have to occur.
I don't think it's allowed.
I don't know that it's even allowed, frankly, as a testing operation. It'd have to be licensed under the state's testing rules, to basically licensed as a testing facility. So again, I don't, if it's available, if they can do it under those rules, which I don't think we believe they can, then they would be able to do it under our rules. We looked at the state classifications on this.
So I guess to me, that seems like a bit of a loophole, and whether, we may want to look into that, whether we approve this tonight or not, we would just check that out.
I can follow up on that, but I'm happy to follow up.
And I believe that the dispensary on the north end of town, I believe I've heard a couple of times that there's a testing laboratory there that is in the vicinity, but not the same business as.
Again, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing there.
Chief, do you
There was
have?
one there, it has moved since.
Oh, it has.
It is still in our town, but that's kind of,
Yeah.
I guess, the point. It's here and it's really near, and,
Is that the one that moved to the urban growth boundary?
No, it's
Is it
it's inside town.
yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And then I had one other question. Under section 4, item 7, medical marijuana dispensaries and recreational marijuana retailers are not required to comply with section 8-4483 in parentheses. I wasn't sure what it was referring to.
I think that's taking them out of the business license requirement. So let me take me back to
Okay.
yours. Section 7.
In section 4, parentheses 7.
What page is that, Tom?
Page. Actually, it's the last page.
Okay, I'm still on page.
Well, the last page of the ordinance. I'm looking at my iPad here.
I'm going to go down.
There it is, right there.
448.3. So let's see what 448.
So we need to know what 8448-3 is.
Did you find that one?
That's what I'm looking for.
Let me see if I have to.
You're getting close, Karen.
I'm going to have to get into the code separately, so just,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
What we're gonna do here is that if we can take care of all the questions, we can just take care of it. We can do this and not have to bring back more paper. You're okay with that? Just take a moment here.
Internet's taking a minute.
Odors.
You got it, chief?
Yeah, I believe it's the odors section.
Okay,
Oh, that was all.
Okay,
It's
all right,
last.
okay, all right.
It's the odor mitigation.
okay.
It's the odor mitigation. Did you get that?
Could you say that so?
I'm sorry, that's the provision that requires odor mitigation, so those are the two facilities that we've exempted from that.
Okay, good, all right, it makes sense. Thank you for following up on that. If everybody's okay, I don't hear anybody yelling and screaming. Karen, do you have appropriate language so we
Yeah, I
can?
passed it out earlier.
Oh, thank you, do you not love me anymore? I don't have a piece of paper?
I think I have
Somebody, if
yours.
I can take a look?
You're not probably gonna vote on this.
Well, okay, I just want to make sure that, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, since this is an ordinance, let's do
I
the
would
ordinance.
be
Carol.
happy to start it off.
Please do.
I move to read the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2017-06 in full, as the text is contained in the council packet for the first time.
Second.
I have a motion, second, is there discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries.
An ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 12, marijuana businesses of the Independence Municipal Code.
Okay, the second motion?
I move to read the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2017-06 for the second time by title only.
Motion? And a second. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries.
An ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 12, marijuana businesses of the Independence Municipal Code.
Diana, do you want to read it? And
I move to adopt the proposed ordinance, Council Bill number 2017-06.
I have a motion?
I'll second.
And a second by Counselor? Is there a second, is there any discussion?
Give me 2 seconds.
Come again? Hearing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much.
The bill has passed and will be assigned ordinance number 1561.
Okay. Any council announcements before I do the executive session reading?
Yes, I will not be here for the November 6th meeting. I have been asked to speak at a broadband conference in Atlanta.
And that is a big national conference.
It is a big national conference, and I've been asked to speak because I have the unique perspective of having watched the complete development of the business and then working for it.
Great. Congratulations. Anything else? If not, The Independent City Council meeting will now meet in executive session for the purpose of negotiating real property transactions pursuant to ORS 1926602E. The representative of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report any deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session is previously announced. No decision will be made in executive session. This time, the council will adjourn the conference room for the duration of the executive session. Once the executive session is adjourned, we will return to open session in the council chambers. Any decision from the executive session will be deliberated at this time. It is not anticipated, for those in the audience, we do not anticipate, Mr. Kleiner, we don't anticipate any action other than adjournment.
And that's correct, sir.
Okay? Everybody okay? All right, let's go to the executive session.